Well, hey there, I'm Hudson Henry. This is Approaching the Scene, and we're going to talk about cleaning your sensor. I'm going to talk about using a gel stick, blowing the sensor out, and I'll put some links in to some more advanced sensor cleaning techniques, some wet techniques that I've done, of course. But this is one of the reasons why I have to clean my sensor so frequently. I'm an avid kiteboarder. I love photographing kiteboarding. I love going kiteboarding. It's such an amazing photogenic activity, but it's also a sport where we've got so much sand and trained in wind, blowing water, that changing a lens is going to pretty much lead us to having to clean the sensor pretty frequently. Weather sealing's super important too. It's one of the reasons why I'm still a DSLR Nikon fan. But so we'll talk a little bit about sensor cleaning. Again, I'm Hudson. This is Approaching the Scene. This is a series of weekly videos that I put out on Thursday about all things photographic. I want it to be a conversation about the technology, the convergence of video, time-lapse, and stills, what's happening with other photographers out in the field, and I'd love for you to join that conversation. You can send me a question at questions@hudsonhenry.com, or you can easily log on to the website at www.hudsonhenry.com/ats and leave me a question. So I'll get to a couple of questions after we get back in the studio, and I'll do a little bit of sensor cleaning. But for now, I'm going to get out, do some kiteboarding, and photograph some kiteboarding. So anyone who was watching last week saw there was some video in my introduction on the white salmon sandbar where my A65 sensor, my A6500 sensor was just super dirty. There were just specks all over the sky. And that's where it's going to show up. It's going to show up in those kind of uniform areas of your photos, like a blue sky, where you've got, especially when you're stopped down a little bit. I'm going to show you today, just using a few simple tools, how you can get your sensor cleaned probably 90% of the time. I'm not going to go into the full wet cleaning tutorial. I have a tutorial on wet cleaning available in my store. I'll link that. If you want to go to the whole level of doing a wet sensor cleaning, it's not that complicated to do. But I'm going to show you some steps that probably are going to get your sensor clean without going to that level of detail. And I'll show you kind of some steps on both mirrorless and mirrored cameras. I think the first question is, how do you tell if you have dust on your sensor? Well, you probably already know because you've been editing images and you're seeing dust specks all over the place, and you're like, well, how do I get rid of these things? But to test whether or not your sensor's clean after you've cleaned it, there's a couple of methods. I'm going to show with the mirrorless with this A6500 right now. You take the lens off, your sensor's sitting right there, and this sensor's so dirty I can visibly see dust on it. But they make these little sensor loops. This one's by McNova. There are several others. This is a brand new one I just got. It magnifies everything, and you can just light up your sensor really nicely, look through this, and see, wow, there's a whole bunch of ugly dust on this sensor. That's a real simple way. Another way to just double check and make sure things are looking good is to put a long lens on your camera, focus that thing out to infinity, and put it in aperture priority mode, whatever, but focus it out to infinity, get a hand-holdable shutter speed, and just point it at a pure white wall, or here I'm using a piece of paper. The big key is go into manual focus, focus it at infinity, and hold that big lens absolutely close up so that you're not focused on anything at all. It's just pure white, and you snap an image. And then you go in, look at the image review. Whoa, I can see sensor dust without even zooming in. But if you brought this up on your computer big, you're going to see all the dust that's on the sensor. It should just be a pure white, unfocused image. Instead, you're going to see all the dust that's on the sensor. So, that being said, the kind of first line of sensor cleaning, and I'll show you that with this guy, is just blowing off the sensor. So what I'll do on a DSLR is you go into its menu system, and you're going to scroll down. I'm using Nikon here. It's down in its setup menu. And one of the options under the setup menu is lock up mirror for cleaning. I'm going to go ahead and hit that button, click the start button. You want to make sure you have a full battery in your camera. And it tells me that when the shutter button is released or is pressed, the mirror is going to lift and the shutter is going to open. To lower the mirror, turn the camera off. So I'm just going to go ahead, pull my lens off of here. Oh, before I even do that, Most modern cameras have this. I'm going to go back into that menu. There's a button for clean image sensor. I'm going to go ahead and hit that and tell it to clean now. And it's going to just do some micro vibrations. It's just basically vibrating that sensor a little bit, and it hopefully knocks the dust off. And then you're going to check it again. You know, pull your lens off. We'll take a shot of a piece of paper or a white wall, pull your lens off and look at it with the loupe. If you've still got dust on there, then go ahead to that menu item I was just talking about. It's right below it on Nikon in the setup menu. And go ahead, hit start. And when you press the shutter button, it's going to open that mirror, lift it, and I can see inside right to the sensor. And I'm just going to blow that whole mirror blocks assembly off with my rocket blower brush. And all this stuff I have in the ATS links page. I'll put a link to that page in the YouTube video description just down below. But just go ahead and blow this off. I consider these necessities. They're kind of down in the necessities section of the ATS links. Blow it off. Keep it upside down so no dust is falling into it. Have a look up at it. And in my case this time, this DSLR sensor, it looks really clean. When I turn the switch off, the mirror is going to drop. Might blow that mirror box out too. Just make sure there's no dust that's about to get in there when it opens. And then I'm going to go ahead, put my lens back on, call it good. What happens though if you've got some stubborn dust that won't come off with the blower brush? Well, there's one more step that I tend to go to before I go to a wet cleaning, and that's using one of these little sensor gel sticks. Now they make them for Sony and they make them for Nikon. There are special ones for Sony. I haven't any problem using the regular one for Sony. I don't recommend it. If you've got a Sony, go ahead and get the orange one that's made for Sony. Again, I haven't had any problems using this gently with my Sonys. But what you've got is this kit with this little sensor gel. It's just a gel stick that's got a little kind of toothbrush cover on it, basically, to keep it clean, inside this nice little aluminum case that you can carry around. And along with it are some little sticky pads, and you can just peel the protective coat off of those, and I'll show you how you use those in 1 second. Give me just a second, I'll set up and I'll show you how to use one of these to get your sensor clean. Well, actually first, when you're going to do a mirrorless camera that has in-body image stabilization, really important step is going to be to go into its menu, and I would pull your lens off, hold the camera upside down, and you're going to go into your menu, and under the suitcase, go to cleaning mode, and you're going to tell it to clean the sensor. Now, some people tell you, you know, don't ever take the lens off and leave the camera turned on. I've never had a problem doing that. I mean, I guess technically maybe you shouldn't do that, but I just don't want to drop all that dust into my lens. So whether you use your cap for your camera or not, I have no problem with that. But the cool part about this is it locks the sensor in place. So because when you have in-body image stabilization, a lot of times that sensor is kind of floating around, and I can see with the naked eye it didn't get all the dust off this. We're going to have to use the sensor swab. But certainly if I look with the loupe, wow, there's a lot of dust on there. But when you use the in-body image stabilization cameras like this, they're kind of, the sensor's suspended. That's where that stabilization happens. There's a little shock absorber system in there, and you don't want to damage that, either wet cleaning or using a gel stick on it. So I would recommend, you know, running that cleaning technique. I'm going to pull the eye cap off this so it sits flat. And I'll set up the camera so you can have a closer view of what I'm doing while I clean this with the gel stick. All right, so I got a little recording where you can see what's happening with the stick inside the camera with my little Sony RX100. And I'm going to go ahead and put on a headlamp because I want to see what I'm doing. It's that same headlamp that I recommend you all carry into the field. I got my Princeton Tech Viz right here. And I'm just going to go ahead, open this little gel stick without touching it. I'm going to peel back that little sticky sheet. A number of those come with this, and you can order more. It's kind of sticky. Let's see. Oh, there we go. It's going to peel that back. I've got this nice little sticky sheet, and I'm going to stick my gel down on that sticky sheet. It's going to get any dust or stuff off there, and I'm going to look down in here, and I can see the dust. That lifted that right off. I'm going to go ahead and stick this in a new spot on that sticky sheet. Gets the dust that I just picked up off. There's some more dust. Boom, it's gone. I'm going to go ahead and stick that in a new spot. Peel it off. The deal is that that little sticky sheet is stickier than the sensor gel stick. So when you pick up the dust off the sensor, I wouldn't press very hard, particularly if you have in-body image stabilization. We're just going through, getting all the visible bits of dust off. There's one. Put it onto that sheet. I'll just go ahead and there we go. Ooh, I can still see a couple more little bits. There's one. Oh, there was a lot of dust on this sensor. No doubt about it. And then as you kind of get wrapped up with it, go ahead and stick that little gel stick back in its case. You take your magnifying loupe. I see one more speck of dust in there. Right there. I think that's got it. Looks really good. So, my recommendation would be to go ahead, turn off your headlamp, hit the OK button here, or you turn the power off, turn the power back on, go into your menu one more time, hit the cleaning mode, just to shake it off one more time, turn it off, put your lens back on, and shoot your white piece of paper again. And this time you should see no dust speckles. I'm going to go ahead and shoot that one more time here. Again, I'm in manual mode. I'm going to go ahead and focus out to infinity. And then just zoom in on the back. Wow, I don't see anything. Last time I took this picture, it was crazy. Zooming in, it looks great. I'll take a look at it on the computer, but I think I've got my sensor relatively clean. So, you know, if you've got some schmutz, if there's a smear on your sensor, if it's not just a dust speckle, that's when you're going to want to need to go in and do a wet sensor cleaning. Once you've used one of these little paper tabs, you know, I recommend throwing it away, get a new one with your swab. Keep your swab in that little toothbrush kind of cover that it's got, close it up. Again, if you're a Sony person, get the orange one made for Sony. I bought this for Nikon. I've used it with my Sonys. You know, my Nikons are my primary camera, so I don't necessarily feel like buying another one for Sony because it seems to work fine, but I can't, you know, I wouldn't recommend using the blue one. Use the orange one that's made for Sony's sensors. These little guys, affordable, great tool for checking your work. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy having that whole system to just quickly and easily clean. And you know, the first line of defense, don't go past blowing the sensor out if you don't need to. If you can't get it with blowing the sensor out, have a good look at it with this. If it's just some dust speckles, these gel sticks are great. If that's not going to do it, either take it and have it professionally cleaned, or you know, I've got a link to my training tutorial series, my little mini course on wet sensor cleaning. But 9 times out of 10, I don't think you're going to need to do that. So I had a question just this week about why I don't just use slotted filters with square filters. I answered a question about vignetting and round filters. And I guess the answer is, you know, sometimes I use this Hoya Evo system, which is really similar to Lee's system, and their filters are really nice and neutral. And in the old days, I used to use Stingray graduated neutral density filters. But when you look at the size and weight of this system and how kind of complicated it is to keep all the glass clean in it, I have white gloves packaged in here, compared to my system with 3 neutral density filters and a polarizer. You know, and using the magnetic system from the Zoom, the Manfrotto Zoom system, it's just so easy to just thread that in front of my lens and I've got it. And I like the circular polarizer better in a round than in a square. And I don't feel like graduated filters are that useful unless I'm shooting video or doing time lapse where I don't have the post-production capabilities of blending a few exposures. I'd much rather blend a few exposures for the highlights and shadows than use a graduated filter these days. The post-production, you know, it makes it so easy to just blend those in a nice natural way, whereas putting a straight line of darkness across the landscape doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So mainly it's a weight and simplicity factor. I suppose, you know, if I had a lens that had horrible problems with vignetting, I would also use these for stills, but mainly this is a video time-lapse kit for me. So that's the reason. I just lightweight, small, easy to carry into inaccessible places, and simple. It's just simple to use. So, you know, you just work through, make sure you don't have vignetting issues. You know, I carry an 82 millimeter set of 4, 6, and 10 stop Hoya Solus infrared neutral density filters and an HD3 circular polarizer. The whole thing fits in this nice little Mindshift filter nest, and it's with me all the time. So, hey, thanks everybody. If you want to join the conversation, if you have a question, send it to questions@hudsonhenry.com. You can also log on to the website, www.hudsonhenry.com/ATS. This has been a ton of fun. I'm going to be gearing up for a trip, teaching a workshop for Day of the Dead in Michoacan, Mexico in under 2 weeks. I'm really, really stoked about it. So I think next week I'm going to be talking about packing gear and traveling internationally with camera gear, and also, you know, what I'm taking on this trip and why. All right, we'll see you next time.